So with the interest of time, so let's start. So we have our staff already about 47 participants right now. So good morning, everyone. So I warmly welcome Chanel de Almeida, my friend. I met at Swisscom at the event, and then we made friends. So thank you, Chanel. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in profession. So thank you very much for volunteering the session to give us a little bit of insights on well-being during COVID world. So we are, I think, already in the third wave also. That is an ideal topic to be in. So warmly welcome, Chanel. And once again, on behalf of Emla, thank you very much for joining the session. So let's begin. And also, guys, she is not using any PowerPoint presentations. So it's going to be an interactive session. So I think she will need your participation. So let's contribute so that we can make it an insightful session. Over to you, Chanel.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think in terms of well-being, now it's even more relevant than it ever has been in the past, because now people understand that when you don't take care of your health, there could be ridiculous repercussions, right? And now because we are facing a pandemic, it's that much more obvious that health and wellness is at the forefront, right? So as a species, as humanity, wellness is not something that you do as a luxury, right? People have been pitching and marketing wellness in recent years as a bit of a high-end thing. But the fact is, every human being needs to take care of their health, right? It's the most bare minimum basic thing. So to put everything in a nutshell, I always like to discuss what wellness means to people, right? What do we mean by wellness? If anyone can tell me how they would define wellness, I would really like to hear from you. Okay, so just if you could explain to me what wellness is in a couple of words, please share your thoughts. Anybody? There's no correct or wrong answer. Just give me anything. If I could define wellness, if you could define wellness in a couple of words or a few sentences, what would that be? If one person answers, then I think everyone else.
Maybe Chanel, I'll go ahead.
Sure.
So for me, it's about a state of being in good health.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And I will add on to that, Sharon, and say that wellness is a cumulativeness of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, right? So in a nutshell, there are four main dimensions that we talk about in terms of well-being, right? And let's start with the physical, right? So when you look at physical health, what is the physical, right? That is the body that you have, the things that are obvious to you, that are functioning in the material world, right? So the thing is, if you don't sustain your physical well-being, the vessel that carries everything else, right? Your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, your personality, the characteristics that you have to create relationships with other people does not exist, right? So physical well-being is the foundation of health, right? That's why you need to nurture your body. So how do you nurture your body, right? The most basic thing, I know a lot of people talk about exercise, right? And exercise is extremely important. But the fundamental thing when it comes to well-being is nutrition, right? Because what you put into your body is the most important thing, right? Because that is what's going to create the oxygen flow. That's what's going to help the proteins get made. That's what's going to help with neurogenesis, which is the reincarnation of all the cells, right? So when you have, we lose around thousands and thousands of cells every single day, right? And while we sleep, those nerves get regenerated. And that's what helps us fight disease, right? So in order to help with the body's natural immunity functions, we need help from our nutrition, because nutrition is where we get all the extra nutrients, right? And that's what creates cells and the functioning of the human body. So you always start with health. So I know it's very difficult for people to eat healthy, right? What with all the carbohydrate infested foods that we have, right? Whether it's kottu or pizza or ice cream or whatever it is, because unhealthy food creates positive mood for a couple of minutes or a few minutes, right? So people are very addicted to unhealthy food for that reason, because they are made to be addictive, right? So it's very, I'm not saying don't eat unhealthy food at all, okay? It's very important to be able to enjoy your daily functioning and eat whatever you like. But we have a rule in health and wellness ideology, which is referred to as the 80-20 rule. I don't know how many of you have heard of the 80-20 rule, but it's quite foundational in terms of the literature, right? So 80% is healthy eating and 20% is not so healthy eating, right? So for example, if you like a glass of wine like I do, right? Every night you just have one glass of wine. You don't have more than one glass, okay? Maybe two, but that's it, right? And the rest of your diet should involve non-processed food. So non-processed food is basically food that hasn't been, done, not too much has been done to it, right? That's a simple way of remembering what non-processed food is. Process means things have been done to it, right? So the more natural some food is, the healthier it will be for you, right? Because we are human beings, right? We come from the earth, right? So in order to sustain our natural functioning, you need to eat more natural things like fruits, vegetables, right? And even carbohydrates in small quantities. So the problem with a lot of diets around the world is the unhealthy things are more and the healthy things are less. So for example, if you take the Sri Lankan rice and curry, right? Usually people's rice amounts will be this much, right? And the curry and the vegetables will be like that much, right? So that needs to improve in order to have healthy nutrition. So that's the most foundational thing. Then we can talk about the second aspect of physical well-being, which is movement. I don't like to talk about exercise because exercise is very prescriptive, but movement is something anyone can understand, right? Your body needs to move, right? You don't necessarily have to be an athlete or a gym freak, right, to be healthy and have the benefits of exercise. Movement is more than enough. So the general recommendation is 150 minutes per week, right, for physical activity. So movement can be anything, and it can be fun, right? You don't have to just hit the exercise machine just because you want to lose weight, right? One thing you should be doing is moving considerable amounts of time during the day so that your blood circulation is increased, that you sweat a little bit, right? So it's all about, taking less than you're putting out, right? That's the basic science of health when it comes to exercise, right? And so when you are operating on a daily basis, you have to ensure that when you're moving, you are actually moving effectively. So for example, stretching is something that people don't really think about. People just exercise, right? But you need to stretch. Stretching is very, very important for the muscles. You can't really function properly unless you stretch. Most people don't stretch enough before they exercise or before they work out. But all the trained athletes around the world know that you have to first stretch in order to get into a workout. So try not to think of exercise as this prescriptive thing you have to do, rather a fun thing that your body needs, right? So movement can be anything. It could be dancing, it could be walking up and down, it could be stretching, it could be playing a sport, right? Make it fun. That's the point of movement. Our ancestors used to move much more than we do now, right? Especially when you are seated at the offices, right? It's a sedentary lifestyle, meaning most of the time we're seated in one place. We're not moving. Our bodies were made to be functioning, hunting, gathering, moving from place to place. That's what our ancestors did, right? In the caveman era, when our first primates evolved, right? So our body's functioning is all about, getting just a little bit of movement here and there. Don't try to overdo things in life. It's all about balance. It really, really is, right? It's about making sure that you don't do too much, but you don't do too less either, right? So it's all about that middle ground. So those are the two aspects when it comes to physical well-being, right? And so just if there's nothing else that you get from health and wellness, just remember those two aspects, right? And that can get you very, very far. There's also an aspect of hydration that's very important. So water is the most basic thing that human beings need, right? We can go on for a few more days extra without food, but not water, right? So hydration is the most fundamental thing when it comes to how our bodies function. We are 70% water after all. So you need to hydrate. Whether you like water or not is not the issue. The fact is you need to hydrate. And especially in a really hot country like ours, hydration is paramount. So 2 liters on average or more would be ideal, right? So that's a basic in terms of physical dimensions. So a lot of people during this time, you know, they forget these things. I've heard a lot of stories from people who, you know, because they're working from home, at times to deal with stress and to deal with boredom, sometimes they eat, and they eat junk food, right? Rather than eating healthily, because it's addictive and it distracts you, right? So it's very important to create an atmosphere where you have access to healthy food, right? And it's really not as hard as you think it is. It actually, you have so many resources out there now, especially thanks to the internet, right? Where you can find recipes for healthy eating, which is delicious as well, right? So it's all about adapting to the current volatile environment, right? And understanding that you will be limited in certain ways because of this current situation. You can't go out as much, right? But that is more the reason why you need to look at where you are and make the most of it, right? So that is the physical aspect. Second is the mental. So mental health is, I think now it's getting much more traction. People are understanding just how important it is to be psychologically healthy, not just physically healthy, because I'm a firm believer that you can't separate the two. You need to be physical and mentally aware. You can't be one or the other, because your body and your mind are intertwined, right? Your brain tells you when you're hungry. Your brain tells you when you are feeling not so good about a situation, right? And your body reacts to that. The only reason you know that you are stressed out is because your brain tells you, right? The only reason you're hungry or the only reason you feel like you're nervous is because your brain is telling your body to react a certain way. So you can't neglect either aspect. Both are equally important, right? So if you want to be physically healthy, I would say make sure your mental health is good too. If you want to be mentally healthy, I would suggest you work on your physical health as well, because both are equally important and they feed off each other, right? So how do you protect your mental health in times where, you know, everything is going a little crazy? See, very often as human beings, we always look to the external world to solve the internal problems, right? We look to our partners to make us feel better. We look to, you know, food or buying things or a car or a promotion, or, you know, everything's external for happiness for most people. But the fact is, all of that lies within us. Everything is inside. It's always internal, right? It starts from here, right? Or starts from here, rather, not really here. And how do you monitor that, right? So we have a few suggestions when it comes to understanding yourself. And one thing I always like to share with people is try getting to know who you are during this time. Right? Sorry, it's raining really hard, Sharon, so if the noise is bad, I apologize. So you start by doing something like that I like to call a SWOT analysis, a personal SWOT. So you all would have heard of a business corporate SWOT, right? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this is basically a SWOT analysis for your internal self, right? So you figure out, you know, my name is Sharon, and what are my strengths? Right? What are the things I'm really, really good at and what I really, really like about myself? What are your weaknesses? What are some of the things that you really get upset about? What are the things that you don't like happening, right? You'd be surprised how many people don't know, right? So if I were to ask you guys, what are some of your strengths? What are some of your weaknesses? Most of you won't know right off the bat, right? So it's important that you do know where you stand in terms of who you are as a person. So strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. So when you look, for example, right now, where we are in the world, all the uncertainty, the anxiety, the depression that's happening, the overwhelming stress, the pressure to do certain things that you can't do normally because of the restrictions, it's very important that you look at it as an opportunity, right? Because every struggle in the human experience is also an opportunity, right? There are ways you can relook and rethink who you are as a person and where you are at in life. Everything that you think is just perspective, right? Everything that we think is just perspective. That means we are thinking it because we choose to think of it based on things that we've learned, right? So our reality is one thing, our perspective defines it, right? So we have to be very mindful of the perspective that we have, because the perspective that we have is a accumulation, right? An addition of all the things that have happened to us. The books we've read, the movies we've watched, the music we've listened to, the people we've interacted with, all create a narrative of who we are, right? Most of it is socially constructed. None of it is very true, okay? Truth is very difficult to define, right? So it's important that we understand our mental standing, right? Through little things, like through therapy, that's what we try to do. We try to define who we are as people, right? Clients are told to discover themselves, because the greatest person you will ever know in your life is you, right? You are the one person that matters the most to yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be selfish. It means about being self-aware. Because if you know who you are as a person, right, it's that much easier to treat other people a certain way. The problem is a lot of people are very insecure, right? Everybody's insecure. But if you are not aware of your insecurities, if you are not managing your insecurities, then what happens is issues in relationships, issues with your job, issues with your mental health, issues with a lot of things. And that's why a lot of people are unhappy, because they haven't learned who they are and how to deal with things in life. As simple as that, right? Because there are people in very, very limited means, right? So they've studied an island in Italy called Sardinia. I don't know whether you've heard of that place. It's supposed to be a village of the happiest people in the world, right? And mind you, these happy people don't have very fancy things, right? What they do have is a sense of community, unity, right? People they can talk to, fresh food every day, right? They have like a farmer's market, right? They share things with each other. And so their health is very good because they're eating healthier, they're eating natural food, they have a lot of friends, they are always hanging out, they're having a sense of community, there's zero racism, there's not much comparison, social comparison. So it's just a really great, simple, but very, very happy, content life, right? So we have to be mindful of where we are in our world, right? And the limitations that our culture puts on us, and keep an open mind of how we approach the world, right? So this is an opportunity for you to do that. COVID, isolation is not necessarily a prison sentence. It's actually an opportunity to discover who you are as a person, right? So take that time. I would do that for homework tonight, if you can, right? While you sit down and you list out 3 things that you feel you have as a strength, 3 things that you have as a weakness, right? And a few opportunities that you see coming from this current situation that you are facing, whatever it may be, right? Everyone has some kind of a problem, right? Everybody has something they don't like. Figure out ways to look at it in a good way. What is your opportunity? And last but not least is your threat, right? So threat is what could be something that would really affect you negatively from this situation, right? What is a fundamental issue that could really affect you in a bad way? Think about it, right? Now, you don't think about your threat and automatically feel crappy about your life, right? There are a lot of things that are going well. The thing with the human mind is it's naturally negative, right? That's because back in the day, we had it really hard. You know, we were just like, you know, all the other animals in the jungle. We had to figure out how to eat, how to survive for a day, how to protect ourselves from predators. We had a lot of real problems those days, right? The thing is now we don't really have that many existential problems. They are very different. They're more intrinsic problems, right? Stressful work, difficult boss. Do I need a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Do I need to get married? Should I have children? All these other stuff, right? Which are not existential, but they matter to us as people that need esteem needs, right? So try out that exercise. It's really, really helpful. I have done it every year. I do that actually. Okay, so I do my own personal SWOT. So try it out because this gives you a framework of where you are at in life. Okay, so that's your tip for your mental well-being. The third is emotional, right? What is emotional? Emotional is basically how we feel about things, right? So one way you can really understand your emotions, right? That is, how do you know you're stressed out? Did someone tell you that you're stressed out? Did you hear about stress? Just do you think that stress is the in thing, the trendy thing to talk about now, right? The society dictates what we think is important, right? So we need to figure out what are our feelings, right? So one of the best things we can do to gather what our feelings are is to keep a journal or a diary, right? So it's just a basic book where you write about your day. So I feel like this because of isolation. I feel like this because of what's happening in the world. You need to do what we call a brain dump, right? Because there are around 60,000 thoughts that we think. The average human being has 60,000 thoughts a day, right? So how do you filter those thoughts, right? That's why most of the time we feel so confused and overwhelming. It's because there's so much in our heads, right? So one way of dealing with that is by brain dumping, right? And brain dumping is through journaling. One of the most effective ways of doing it, right? Because when you write down in black and white, it's that much more real and easier to control your mindset, right? So start, if you can, after you do your SWOT analysis, you can start by writing down your feelings per day, right? Just a perspective. A lot of people do this just before they go to bed at night, right? Where they write down their most intrinsic feelings, how they felt about today. If they had an argument with someone, they write about it so that you don't think about it. See, we have a joke in the psychology circles where we say your problems are far worse in your head than they are in reality, right? Your brain is going to create all kinds of stories. That's what your mind does. It likes to create stories about everything, right? So in your head, whatever happens in your outside world, it will be far worse in here because it will dramatize everything, right? So it's important to get a perspective on paper, right? So that you have control of what's in here, right? So that you don't get carried away. That's why most people overthink, right? We keep thinking of the same thing over and over and over and over again because our mind is like, have you found a solution to this? What are you going to do about it? Oh my God, that's really bad. Okay, focus on the worst case scenario. So it's very easy for our brains to look at the situation and say, oh my God, that's really bad, right? Because negative mind, it's very hard. Why do you think we talk about positive thinking so much? It's because it's not natural for us, right? It's very unnatural to be positive, okay? It's a learned thing. So being negative is actually the most natural thing because our brains are problem-solving mechanisms that have evolved for thousands and thousands of years to help us figure out things to help us survive. So that's the difference, right? That's why it's so hard to think positively. That's why we have to train ourselves to think positively. And when I say positive, I don't mean you just be happy for no reason and you just always be positive. No, that's not natural either, right? It's not good to force yourself to be positive. There is such a thing as being toxic positivity, right? So that is when you are just positive without dealing with the negative. That's very dangerous. And that's the problem with social media, right? Social media creates an impression that everything is nice and that positivity is everywhere and everyone's really happy. And that's not true, right? And then you feel like you need to do that, or you need to be like that, or you need to have that. So, no, fact is, it's just a highlight reel of the world that is a construct, right? So it's important to really think twice before you let your mind get carried away with anything, right? And one great way of doing this is managing your emotions that are created when you look at certain things or hang out with certain people or deal with certain situations in your life. And journaling will help. If something upsets you and if something is really causing distress, put it down on paper, right? So that you get a perspective on what is it exactly that's upsetting you, right? That is how you deal with your emotions. So if you're feeling really stressed out, what are you really feeling stressed out about? There's always an origin of what is causing us issues or distress or negativity, right? If you can't solve the problem, then it's probably not worth thinking about, right? If it's a problem that there really is no solution, then you need to rethink on how you're looking at it as a problem, right? Perspective of the problem, right? So that is the number one tip I would say for the emotional understanding of the emotional dimension, right? Last but not least is the spiritual dimension. Now, when I say spiritual, a lot of people get confused thinking it's religious. But religion can be a part of spirituality, but it doesn't necessarily have to be spirituality. When we talk about spirituality, we are talking about your sense of meaning in life, right? Human beings, we're not like other animals in the sense that we have to find a reason for doing things. Whereas animals, they genuinely react based on instinct. I need to eat, I need to drink, I need to survive, right? I need to protect myself. We look at something and go, how do I feel about it? Why do I think that way? Who is that person? Like we have an extra layer onto the things that matter to us. Instead of just doing a job, most people now, they want to do a job that matters. That's what millennials are like, right? People who are born from 1985 onwards, we really care about how the work that we do matters rather than just working. Previous generations, they worked to survive. They worked to bring money back home. Now, a lot of younger people are saying, no, I don't want to just work for money. I want to work for purpose. I want to work for meaning in life, right? So the spiritual dimension is about understanding what truly matters to you and how are you going to make that happen in your life, right? So your spiritual understanding is what is the meaning that you are giving to your life. And when you are on your deathbed, right? So death is an inevitable situation, right? How are you going to look back and think, okay, on your deathbed, did I do what I needed to do? And am I satisfied? And most people on their deathbed are not going to think about the kind of car they drove, the size of their house, or anything superficial. They're going to think about the people they love, the kind of impact they made, the simple things. It's always the simple things that matter to us. When you really think about the human mind, our sense of well-being and happiness stems from very simple things, not complex things, right? So It's about reminding ourselves what really matters to us as people, not your parents, not your culture, not your external world. You, what matters to you? Have you paid attention to that? Because as we grow up as children, we're very unapologetic about who we are, right? We ask questions, we are very curious, right? We try to discover things, right, in our environment. And we really we're very honest as children. We just say things as we see it, right? Then when we become adults, what happens? All that natural innocence of being who we are goes away. Because society tells us, oh, this is not the right way. This is the right way. This is how you should be, right? And we need some direction for sure, right? Otherwise, it will be more chaos than it already is. But it's important not to lose track of that childlike curiosity and that childlike innocence that we have as children, to question, to rethink, to explore, to be ourselves, to be authentic, to be real, not fake, right? It's very important that we don't lose sight of who we were as children when we were children. Looking at the world in a way that's explorative and curious and interesting, right? So I would start with the fundamental question of who am I and what do I want my life to be like? Right? So today, so I've given you a few exercises and a few homeworks to do, right? And it's fun, right? It's not, you'll be surprised at the insights that you come up with when you do these few things, right? And make it a daily practice if you can, because it really helps you function as a person. Because very often we are functioning on an automatic switch. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you get breakfast, you go to work, that's it. Maybe you hang out, maybe you go out, right? It's all automatic, it's not conscious. So with mental health, we say, be conscious. Be conscious with what you're doing. Don't just do things mindlessly. Try and figure out the deeper meaning in what you're doing, right? There was a famous monk who once said that he can find pleasure when he's brushing his teeth. Because when he brushes his teeth, he really thinks about brushing his teeth. He sits in the situation, he observes himself brushing his teeth, and there's pleasure in that. So you'll be surprised at the pleasure we can derive out of anything in life. And that's what mindfulness is about. It's about really being entwined at the current activity that you are doing. Most of the time, we are not mindful. Most of the time, we just do things automatically. Learned behavior. So what we're saying here is, in order for well-being to be at your best, you have to balance these 4 things, right? So what are the 4 things? The physical dimension, where you pay attention to movement and nutrition, right? Your mental dimension, where you are able to filter your thoughts and understand who you are as a person. So where's your self-awareness? Who am I, right? And what am I about? The emotional part, where you really identify your emotions. You don't just listen to what someone else is saying. You really discover, okay, I am feeling angry. I am frustrated because of this, right? Awareness of what you're feeling, not what you're thinking, but what you're feeling, right? And writing about that, right? And of course, figuring out who you are as a person, defining what your spirituality is, what is your purpose, what is the meaning you want to give to your life, right? And why is it important in the first place? Simon Sinek talks about always knowing your why. And it's very true about mental health in general. You need to know why you're doing something, right? If you don't know the why, then why are you doing it, right? Especially in this world, a lot of depression. See, depression is the #1 disability in the world, right? And that is after people reporting. We don't know how many people have not reported who are depressed, right? And especially in Sri Lanka, we have very bad data. We don't have good data on mental health because very few people are interviewed and surveyed effectively in the rural areas, right? And so we don't have enough information, but we do know that our suicide rates are high, right? And that our corruption level is high. And people's perception of how their life is here is really bad. So those are scary things, right? So we need to start by looking at ourselves and figuring out who we are and how we can help our country become better, right? Because when you live in a society, there is no point in just automatically living your life. You should live your life with meaning. And thereby, because you're happy about your meaning, it's natural to not judge others. It's natural not to be jealous of other people when you're so busy working on yourself, right? And fixing who you are. And then you can inspire other people to do the same. That's how the positivity works. And that's what good mental health does to you. So I will end with this quote, right? Since time I was given 45 minutes, right? So I will end perfectly so that I can have some questions. If there are any questions, please fire them out, or you can separately email me or message me through Sharon. Okay. So there's a fantastic quote that I now quote everywhere I go. And it basically says, life is not about avoiding the storm, right? Rather, it's learning how to dance in the rain, right? So life is not about learning how to avoid the storm. Bad things are going to happen. Difficult situations in our lives will always manifest themselves. But it's not about running away from the problems and forgetting it and taking a pill and solving it, right? It's about learning to dance in the rain. You face up to your problems, you face up to your insecurities, you deal with who you are as a person. And eventually, you will get to the point where you realize, and all the great spiritual teachers have realized this and taught this to us, right? Whether it's Buddha, whether it's Jesus, they've all come to that conclusion that life is really simple. It's just about accepting what happens in a way that is nurturing and healthy. So it's all about well-being and how you choose to live your life. And although there will always be struggle, what really, really matters is how you look at it and how you deal with it. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. It's about say for example, since like we are in like a sort of a situation, COVID and all this stuff, you tend to get into bad habits. How do you avoid if you get into one, how to avoid it or how to stay away from it?
Very good question. So basically, when it comes to habits, first you need to define what those habits are that you are saying is bad, right? So would you like to give me an example of what you are talking about? Like, is it eating?
Say smoking?
Smoking, okay. Okay. Yeah, so smoking is a very challenging thing, right? Because it's very addictive. So that can become a physical addiction, right? Where it's your body craves the cigarette. And usually you crave cigarettes when you're stressed, right? Or because you're socializing, right? Because your friends are doing it, then you want to smoke. So yeah. One thing you need to pay attention to is, okay, this is something that you know is an issue, and don't quit. See, quitting is not a good idea. It is figuring out a way to reduce your addiction to something. So everything is like that, whether it's Netflix, whether it's junk food, whether it's a person you're hanging out with, which is not very good for you, right? Even cigarettes, you need to look at it in a way that, okay, how many packs a day do you smoke? Say 2, okay, fine. Now you need to figure out a way to make it less than 2, right? So you progressively reduce. See, the mind is a very tricky thing. It wants to believe that it's doing what it wants to do, right? So there are certain things that you need to perhaps practice in your day-to-day life so that your mind doesn't think you are quitting or, you know, neglecting what you like to do, but you're reducing it to the point where you don't need it anymore, right? So sugar is like that, right? The less sugar you have in a day-to-day basis, the less sugar you crave. Did you know that? Because your body gets addicted to it and thinks it needs it all the time when you're always giving it. But the fact is, sugar in great amounts is not needed. Same with tobacco. So tobacco, why do you like tobacco? Because it makes you feel good at the time, right? And we all know that one cigarette is not going to kill you, right? It's just if you keep smoking a lot, right, and you're constantly smoking, then you could damage your lungs really badly, right? And passive smoking, right? People around you could get hurt and get unhealthy. So start with, when you look at the habit, figure out a way to make it very difficult to get access to it. That's one thing. So we have this saying, you know, if you don't have a pack of cigarettes in your cupboard, and then you have to go somewhere to get it, right? And then how much money are you spending? So the average person spends like what? A couple of lakhs on cigarettes per year, right? It's quite a huge cost, right? So if you look at like 1,300 odd bucks for a cigarette, a really good pack of cigarettes, then you are always debiting your credit account, right? So you have to look at the cost that you are having because of your smoking habit, right? But don't demonize yourself. The problem with people, and when it comes to their bad habits, is that they label themselves as bad people. See, society does that. How do we look at smokers? Oh, smokers. Like, that's not how, that makes things worse. If you treat people like they're bad people for doing something a bit unhealthy, they are only going to feel worse about themselves, right? So we need to understand the cause of them eating unhealthy, smoking, drinking too much, right? All of those things are a result of coping. Life can be hard. We need ways to deal with it. And sometimes we get addicted to the things that give us pleasure. So the best way to deal with habits is make sure, A, you don't have as much access to the bad things, we can call it that. And also figuring out ways to reduce the consumption over time. And so this is your headspace, right? So we need to fill our headspace with things that are better for us rather than bad. So here's the thing, when you smoke, an opportunity has to present itself for you to think about smoking. You don't just automatically think smoking. You might either be with your colleagues, they'll be like, hey, shall we go for a smoke? Or maybe you're getting a little bit stressed out, or you have some time to think. So then you're like, let's reach for a cigarette, right? That's what happens, right? So create less opportunities where you are in the environment of smoking excess first, but reduce the smoking. So today you say you smoke 10 cigarettes, tomorrow it's 9, right? Then the day after it's 8, 7, 6, like that. And then you progressively reduce the amount of consumption. Does that make sense? Sorry, I can't hear. Who was that who asked the question?
That was Chandimal. I think he's not in the call, or
He has got lost.
He's muted. He's there in the call. He's muted. So
okay. Yeah, I just hope
sorry.
I answered Chandimal's question somewhat.
Since there is no response, I believe you did, at least for the answers you gave in, Shannon. Anyone else? He's there. Anyone else who wants to raise a question? Since the interest of time, we can allocate like 1 or 2 minutes. Anyone else who wants to raise a question? Yeah, I think the silence says is no. So I think it's time to wrap up, Channel. So thank you very much once again. It was a very insightful session. I think we learned a lot, and the insights you gave was very useful. Though it was so practical, I must say. Right? Even I also learned a few points. So thank you very much once again for joining us. Wish you all the best. Behalf of IMLA, thank you very much, and
Thank
have
you,
a pleasant
Sharon.
day.
And
Thank
I hope
you.
you all have a healthier and happier new year.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.